So, yep, so I have in a bunch of 3D printer juice ready to go. And as soon as we finish up tonight, I'm filling up the printer. You know, the Elegoo Saturn IV was just announced a couple days ago, and I don't know. There's a lot of conveniences to it. I don't know if I like the printer though. Mixed feelings. I was kind of hoping that they would get away from the rectangular sprites that were in the 3, but everything else about it, it seems pretty good. There's a few other quirks that I don't know, I'd like to avoid. So I don't think I'm going to be upgrading into an Elegoo Saturn IV. But I would like at some point to, I mean, if I can find another Saturn II, they're not in print anymore. I'd have to maybe buy one used, or maybe there's stores that have some. They might be in super clearance for all I know, because the 4s are out. But at least get another 2. If not, look at upgrading into something else. I don't know, we'll just have to see. Dingo, I've been printing a lot. Some of which I can't show off on camera. So, well, not this one anyway. Twitch would be a little upset with me. Nothing is, nothing is like raunchy or, you know, like super, you know, like triple X rated. But there are things that, especially on a PG-13 stream, I just wouldn't want to show. But if you have questions about, if you have an inquiry, such as, well, you know, I'm interested in seafood, and I would like to know my options for seafood, then you can send me a message, and I can let you know the seafood that I have available, okay? After Fov, how dare you? I would never print such things. If the terms of service on Twitch and otherwise tell us those are despicable, terrible things that should never be shown or even implied that anyone has. So let's cool it with the B word there, mister, in this chat. What are you saying, GMV? Am I embittered? Am I a little sore at the topic? Huh. Just you wait till I get my hands on those. Ooh, I better watch what I'm going to say next. Honk, honk. I'm glad that you like them, After Fov. Anyway, let's go for what lieth beneath those things, and get back to Daggerheart. We are still in Chapter 2, and we're going to pick up where we left off with damage rolls. What went wrong with what, After Fov? When you succeed on an attack roll against an enemy, you'll then make a damage roll to determine how much damage, and thus what tier of hit points, your attack inflicts on that target. The damage dice used to make a damage roll generally are determined by the weapon, spell, or ability you're using to make the attack. If the attack is using a weapon, the weapon's damage dice appear in the active weapons section of your character sheet. Which, now this is the 1.2. I doubt too much if anything has changed since 1.3, but all the same, if you take a look here, that's showing you what's going on here. The different thresholds for taking damage and so forth. I do find the hit point system a little convoluted. I understand it, and I suppose if I have any sort of like bleeding off my surface thoughts going over this, a lot of the writing, I mean, maybe just the tone of the writing, but there are aspects to Daggerheart that seem very passively written, very, how do I say this? Hi, Belladonna. Not just like written in a passive voice, but there's a lot of things that seem like detached or hands off, or, a lot of things are very loosey-goosey, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's the tone that reading into it thus far has continued to put into it has become it's not grating. It's not like I'm becoming embittered or I'm going to go to bed upset. But just the very more hands-off, super double, triple check. There's a stage of removal of things. Everything has a backup to make sure that things don't go wrong. And not that... How do I phrase this? It's an emotion. It's a sense that I'm picking up, and how do I describe the sense that I have in a way that is part of a constructive conversation? I don't know. We'll continue, but as I've been reading through this, the very passive nature of the system as it's presented so far, or at least written, has been kind of... I get this feeling. Like, everything is a colorful, vibrant, plastic... Like, everything is safe. Everything is fine and wonderful. No one really gets hurt. No one really gets sad. Like a Saturday morning cartoon. Which I'm not saying is a bad thing, because this could be a niche to fill, to get kind of a Saturday morning cartoon, the RPG feeling. Maybe, now that I'm saying that, I think so far, yeah, it does, and that, maybe just because it's my age. Look, I think I'm going to be 27 this year, or was it 23? It is coddling mechanics and language. This may very well be a good introduction to young people, or maybe there are people who, as a part of some sort of a therapy or a way to overcome some sort of a personal something, this might be a way to get them out of it. Or something but the tone of it is, it is very soft. It is very passive. It is very, like I said, Saturday morning cartoons. Generally, you're a mom or dad. You can put your kid in front of the TV on a Saturday morning. Everything is colorful and vibrant. The heroes are gonna win at the end. You do accomplish like a half-hour story, but does anything really happen? Like it has like short-term vivid bursts. Everything has this kind of, it's a magical world and you could be a 7-foot-tall moth and you're rolling 2d12s, which probably feel very good in your hand as well. So I'm also approaching this from a sensory point of view. But Daggerheart is coming across like a Saturday morning cartoon. Like, this is very much like a PG-13... this is meant for younger people or people who have lower tolerances for conflict or understandings of things, I guess. I'm trying to turn my senses into words, and it can be a difficult thing. Yeah, I mean, this in that result, I don't know what the demographics of Critical Role are, but if it's for people like the language that's here is what I see often used consistently in various online groups. This does seem to have that kind of theme. If you're in this group, then this is built to appeal to you. Which is said very neutrally, because not all games are for all people. They're not written for a particular audience. Now, someone who it's not written for could love the system. This could still be a 10 out of 10, whether it needs polish or not. But I that's the feeling I've gotten so far reading into this is very Saturday morning cartoon. There's a little bit of fun risk, there's some action. There's not consequences. There's not anything that's yeah. But we haven't read the chapter. We haven't read the part about death. We haven't read the part about other things. But it's just the way that this is so passively written has not inspired adventure. It's not inspired kind of this, right? I understand, and I'm not looking for big words or even that big words are a mark of a good game. Because that you can easily overbake or overcomplicate things. You could very much do so. Or the words that you choose have to be careful in the presentation of what you're trying to get across. If you're trying to present a horror game or something with a lot of tension, you want to write in that direction, even if there are certainly moments of comedy and hope. So if this is meant for a younger audience, I can see this being intended for a younger audience with the vocabulary, the word usage, the much more, I guess, passive tone to everything. So, but let's continue. That's not some damning condemnation of this system. But so far, as I'm doing this reading of it, right, this is my first exposure to it. This is what is coming to my mind as we're doing this together. I am not farming clicks on Outrage, nor am I trying to jockey a position with anyone at Darrington Press or Critical Role. I'm a very much neutral party because I also sell things to 12 and 13-year-olds as I do to 42 and 43-year-olds. And so it's finding, I guess it's finding where that is, and then taking what I know from my business, from my professional experience, and even my own tastes as a person, as a human being, much like you other human beings are out there who do human being things. Anyway, let's talk about damage. When you succeed on an attack roll against an enemy, you'll then make a damage roll to determine how much damage and thus what tier of hit points your attack inflicts on that target. The damage dice used to make a damage roll generally are determined by the weapon, spell, or ability you're using to make the attack. If the attack is using a weapon, the weapon's damage dice appear in the active weapons section of your character sheet. If the attack is coming from a spell on a domain card or class feature, it details the damage dice within the text of the move. Hi, Coffee Cat. When striking with a weapon, you'll generally roll a number of your weapon's damage dice equal to your proficiency at the top of your active weapons section. And I'll bring this up again. Bloop. This is the 1.2 character sheet. Maybe something changed for 3, but so you can get a frame of reference. This is what it's this is to what it's referring. You know what? If not Saturday morning cartoons, well, I don't know if this dates me. This is like an RPG version of like Mario 3 or Super Mario World. This is, I think that's resonating. That's fitting a mood, a feel, some senses of things. Maybe that's how it's coming across to me. So, all right. Where were we? Oh yeah, active weapon. When striking with a weapon, you'll generally roll a number of your weapon's damage dice equal to your proficiency at the top of your active weapons section. When striking with a move that does damage, such as a spell, the text of the move will tell you what kind of damage dice should be rolled instead. Anytime a move tells you to deal damage using your proficiency, you roll a number of dice equal to your damage proficiency. Anytime it tells you to deal damage using your spellcast trait, you roll a number of dice equal to your spellcast trait. Seems pretty straightforward. As with action rolls, if you want to add a bonus to your damage roll, you must decide to do so before you roll. After rolling your damage dice, add all their values together and then add any modifiers to determine the result. The GM will mark the corresponding hit points based on that damage. Pardon. Tip, there's a difference in this game between damage and hit points. Damage is the result of your damage roll, including your damage dice and modifiers. Hit points reflect how hard that damage affects the creature who's taking it. The number of hit points a creature marks depends on factors such as their damage threshold, armor, resistances, and immunities. Some damage rolls just tell you to roll a certain number and type of die without any modifiers, plus or minus signs after it. For example, 1d8 physical damage. In this case, simply roll the necessary number of dice and add their values together. Example, Cat makes a successful longsword strike with their guardian against a target using an attack roll of 16. They have a weapon proficiency of 2 and their longsword's damage dice are d8s. So they roll 2d8 and get a 3 and a 7 for 10 total damage. Some damage rolls have modifiers on them like 2d6 plus 2 or 3d8 plus 5. When this is the case, you roll the dice, add their values together, then add the modifier to that total. This modifier is not affected by weapon proficiency. Emerson makes a successful attack with their improvised shortbow, which deals d6 plus 6 damage. They have a weapon proficiency of 3, so they roll 3d6 damage dice. The results are 3, 5, and 6, totaling 14. They then add the damage dice modifier of 6 and deal 20 points of damage to the target. If your attack roll is a critical success, roll damage as usual, then add extra damage equal to the maximum potential value of all your damage dice added together, as if they all rolled the highest number possible. You do not add any modifiers to this extra damage. If for any reason damage should be applied more than once to a creature during your move, that damage should always be totaled together before applying it to the damage thresholds. Sometimes other circumstances affect how much damage a creature takes. Use the following rules to determine whether special circumstances affect the damage roll. There are 2 damage types a weapon, spell, or ability can inflict: physical damage and magic damage. Damage types can affect how damage is dealt or received. For example, a spell might double any magic damage. A condition might make a character resistant to physical damage, or a type of enemy might be immune to a certain type of damage altogether. Physical damage represents a hit primarily through mundane physical contact, something that is usually done without the aid of magic. Most standard blades and bows do physical damage. Magic damage represents a hit that is primarily delivered through magical means. Most spells that deal harm to a target do magic damage. Direct damage is physical or magic damage that automatically hits a target. When a PC or GM deals direct damage, they don't have to make an attack roll to hit. Some abilities, spells, items, or other effects in the game might limit the amount of damage being done to a player through resistance or immunity. The text will usually specify whether this effect applies to either physical or magic. If it does not specify, the effect applies to all types of incoming damage. When a creature has resistance to an incoming type of damage, they divide the damage in half, rounding up, before applying it to their thresholds. For example, you deal 25 damage to them, they would instead only take 13 damage. If multiple features give you resistance, they only count as one source of resistance. When a creature has immunity to an incoming type of damage, they do not take any damage or stress from the attack. If you have resistance or immunity plus another way to reduce damage, such as marking an armor slot, apply the resistance or immunity first. If you wish, you can then use other methods to reduce the damage further. Some moves prompt a reaction roll. This is a roll in response to a threat or attack, representing your effort to avoid or withstand the effect. Reaction rolls generally work very similar to action rolls, except they don't generate hope and fear or additional GM moves, and they don't contribute to the action tracker if it is in play. Additionally, another character can't help you on a reaction roll. Everything is happening so quickly that you'll have to handle this one alone. When you make a reaction roll, the GM will tell you what trait to use, then you'll make a roll with the duality dice, as if it were an action roll. As with action rolls, if you want to add a bonus to your reaction roll, you must decide to do so before you roll. NPCs can make reaction rolls too, though they follow slightly different rules. Example, the GM asks Sarah to make a reaction roll using agility in order for her rogue Isabella to avoid being hit by a mage's explosive spell. Sarah rolls her duality dice, adding her agility, and gets a 19 with hope. It's a success. The GM asks her to describe how she avoids the attack. Advantage and disadvantage. Some features let you roll with advantage or disadvantage on an action or reaction roll. Advantage represents an opportunity through either magical or mundane means that you seize upon to increase your chances of success. When you roll with advantage, you roll an extra d12 hope die and pick whichever hope die result you prefer. Usually this is the highest result, but if your lower hope roll matches the number on a fear die, you can pick it for a critical success. Disadvantage represents an additional difficulty, hardship, or challenge you face when attempting an action. When you roll with disadvantage, you roll an extra d12 hope die and use the lowest hope die result. If you don't have an extra hope die, you can roll your usual hope die twice in a row, then use the corresponding result. Advantage and disadvantage always cancel each other out when applying to the same roll. If, for example, the GM gives you disadvantage on a roll, but you gain advantage from a domain ability, the two cancel one another out. If you have two sources of advantage and one disadvantage, you instead only have advantage. NPCs can also roll with advantage or disadvantage, but when they do, the GM uses an extra d20 instead of a hope die. Some moves may impose a condition on you or your adversaries. These are effects or circumstances that change how you can function. This game has three primary conditions: vulnerable, hidden, and slow, which are explained below. Some moves may apply other unique conditions. Their effects are detailed within the text of the move. When you gain the vulnerable condition, this means you're temporarily in a difficult position within the fiction. This might mean you're knocked over, scrambling to keep your balance, caught off guard, or anything else that makes sense in the scene. When a creature becomes vulnerable, the players and GM should work together to describe narratively how that happened. While you are vulnerable, all rolls targeting you have advantage. If you're already vulnerable, you ignore effects that would make you vulnerable again. While you're out of sight from all foes, you can mark a stress to gain the hidden condition. While hidden, any rolls against you are at disadvantage. When you move or attack while hidden, or when an enemy gains line of sight on you, you're no longer hidden. Restrained. When you gain the restrained condition, you can't move until this condition is cleared, but you can still take actions from your current position. They must have... Unless I missed something, it says vulnerable, hidden, and slow. Maybe, so that could be in the changelog somewhere if at one point in time one was slow and the other restrained, or this wasn't fixed. But that's something else. I don't know if this technically counts as a, like the double commas above that's going through an editor, and that would be pedantic to bring up. But as we're talking about mechanics, it says the three primary conditions are vulnerable, hidden, and slow, and then we have vulnerable, hidden, and restrained. But as I'm seeing restrained twice, and the second one is emboldened, is in bold letters, I will presume that restrained is what was meant. Unless I'm completely missing something on the next page regarding slow. Well, we'll see. But it could be something to point out. We can make a mark here on page 101 about conditions. Alright. When an effect imposes a condition, it might state a specific trigger that will clear that condition. If no trigger is given, you can usually make an action roll to clear the condition. As always, this action roll should be described and negotiated narratively. For example, your character is vulnerable. You might describe how you leap through the fire that's trapped you, free your allies' legs from the vines entangling them, or whatever fits the story. If an adversary is affected by a condition, the GM can spend an action token to clear it. This doesn't require a roll, but does use that adversary's action. Though most conditions are temporary and can be cleared with an action roll, some moves specify that a unique kind of action, item, or effect is necessary to clear the condition. At the GM's discretion, they might provide alternative ways to remove these as well. Sometimes a mechanic or the GM might introduce a countdown. Countdowns are a way for the table to keep track of a coming event, and usually utilize setting a die to a certain value, then ticking that number down until it reaches 0. A countdown might tick every time an action roll is made, every time a PC rolls with fear during downtime, or any other parameter. For more on countdowns, it's later in the next chapter. Daggerheart is a game that can be played using both Theater of the Mind and maps with miniatures. The below section assumes you are using a map for combat. If you aren't, use whatever guidance works well for your Theater of the Mind play. Again, formatting no dashes and dashes, though that's the kind of thing they don't want in the feedback report, so don't report that. That's not necessary. And leave behind anything that doesn't serve your table. At any point, players or the GM may call for a map to be brought to the table. This might be to clarify positioning, showcase an environment, or simply because the table enjoys using maps and miniatures. When this happens, the GM should create or reveal a map of the area, and everyone should place their miniature figures or tokens within it appropriately. This can be as simple as a quick drawing on a piece of paper or as complicated as a fully designed 3D map. As long as it presents the information players need to be able to navigate the space more clearly than in their minds. If you have the space for it, use the range measurements below as a general reference when building out this map. Some tables may almost never use maps, where others might utilize maps every session. There's not a right or wrong way to implement these in your game. Do whatever best serves the kind of play your group enjoys. In Daggerheart, rules don't measure distance by feet, but by range. Each range includes an example of how you might quickly estimate distance on a physical map on which 1 inch represents roughly 5 feet. However, these ranges aren't intended to be precisely measured during play. The suggested estimates are a quick guide for the GM to determine ranges during a scene, and they may adjust the map as needed to reflect whatever creates a satisfying story. If the table decides not to implement a map, you still use range, but in a more abstract way. Distances are simply a part of the theater of the mind, and it's up to the GM to decide roughly how far away everything is. So the ranges are melee, you're within touching distance of the target. As a PC, you can generally touch targets up to a few feet away from you, but melee range may be greater for especially large NPCs. Very close, you're very close to a target, allowing you to see its fine details and to reach it within moments if need be. This is generally about 5 to 10 feet away. While in danger, you can usually move into melee with anything that's very close as part of any other action you make. Anything on a battle map that is within the shortest length of a game card, 2 to 3 inches, can usually be considered very close. Close. You're close enough to a target to see its prominent details, such as across a room or in a neighboring market stall. This is generally about 10 to 30 feet away. While in danger, you can generally move into melee with anything that's close as a part of any other action you make. Period space. Anything on a battle map that is within the length of a standard pen or pencil, 5 to 6 inches, can usually be considered close. Far. You're far enough away that you can see the appearance of a target, but probably not in detail, such as across a small battlefield or down a large corridor. This is usually about 30 to 100 feet away. While in danger, the GM will usually require you to make an agility check if you want to safely move into melee with something that's far from you. Anything on a battle map that's within the length of a standard piece of paper, 11 to 12 inches, can usually be considered far. Very far. You're very far away, and while you might be able to see the shape of a person or object, you probably can't make out any details, such as across a large battlefield or down a long street. This is generally about 100 to 300 feet away. While in danger, the GM will usually require you to make an agility check if you want to safely move into melee with something that's very far from you. Anything on a battle map that is beyond far distance, but still within the bounds of the conflict, can be usually considered very far and out of range. Anything beyond your very far range is out of your range and usually can't be targeted. When a weapon, spell, ability, item, or other effect states a range, this refers to its maximum range. Unless otherwise noted, an effect can be used at closer ranges as well. For example, the short staff starting weapon has close range, so you can use it against a target within close or melee range, but not against a target that's far, very far, or out of range. Some effects may also specify a certain area within their range, such as an effect that targets, quote, all enemies in front of you, end quote. In that example, you choose which direction you're facing, then target each enemy in a 180-degree field. By the way, now this is something I contend with. If I push up my glasses, actually the period should be in the quotation marks. Although I do this too, because to me, if the period's in the quotation marks, it's like you're mentioning the sentence or something, right? Instead of ending this, I don't know. Anyway, I don't mind that the period is outside of the quotation marks. So, but I'm making a sarcastic point about, you know, the minutia of editing. Where was I? All enemies in front of you. In that example, you choose which direction you're facing, then target each enemy in a 180-degree field in front of you. As with other rules in this game, use common sense when interpreting these effects. They're there to support the story, not limit it. Some effects can move you or a target from one range to another, such as an effect that lets you push a target out of melee range. In that example, you would move them to the next range, from melee to very close range. You can always ask the GM which of your ranges a certain target is in, or you can ask which targets are within your desired range. The map is just an approximation of the scene playing out in everyone's head, so scale, distance, and details don't need to be perfectly accurate. The map and the miniatures on it should never limit the table's imagination, only provide spatial context so that everyone is on the same page. Optional rule, defined ranges. If your table would rather operate with more precise range rules, you can use a 1-inch grid battle map during combat. If you do, use the following guides for play. Melee is 1 square, very close is 3, close is 6, far is 12, very far is 13. Which, that's all, I mean, that's the pencil, the card, and everything, right? When you're not in dangerous, difficult, or time-sensitive situation, you don't generally need to worry about how fast you move. However, when you're under pressure, such as when you're in danger or when the action tracker is in play, the following rules apply. If you're doing something that requires an action roll, you can also freely move to a location within your close range, including very close in melee, either before or after you use that action. This location must be somewhere your character could easily reach within the story. If you want to move far or very far, or if you want to reach an area that's not easily accessible, such as one that requires climbing, swimming, or jumping, follow the rules below. Moving far without an action. If you're not already making an action roll, or if you want to move farther than your close range, you'll typically need to succeed on an agility roll to safely reposition yourself. The GM sets this difficulty depending on the situation. On a failure, you might only be able to move some of that distance. The adversaries might act before you can make it, or something might prevent you from moving at all. If there's no risk or potential complication in moving a certain distance, no roll is required. When an adversary uses an action, such as making an attack or picking a lock, the GM can generally move them to a location within their close range as part of that action. If the GM wants to move the adversary far or very far, this uses an entire action on its own. But the adversary doesn't have to succeed on an agility roll like a PC would. Often, an effect asks you to choose a target within range. This means you choose a single creature to affect. When it makes sense in the story, you can ask the GM about... When it makes sense in the story, you can ask the GM about instead targeting a single object in range, adjusting the effects as needed. To affect a group of targets, these targets must be clumped together in an area within very close range of the others in that group. You can always ask the GM if something would be considered a group of targets before you make a move. When you make an attack roll against more than one target or against a group, roll once and compare that total to each eligible target to determine which creatures you succeed against. When your attack deals damage to more than one target, roll damage once and apply it to each target the attack succeeded against. Sometimes during the fight, you might seek cover, such as by diving behind a small barricade or ducking behind a tree. When you take cover behind something that makes attacking... When you take cover behind something that makes attacking you more difficult but not impossible, attack rolls against you are made at disadvantage. You usually can't be targeted if you're entirely behind a substantial object like a wall, even if you're technically in range of the attack. However, you might still be affected by nearby explosions or similar effects. Some effects require the target to be in your line of sight. You have line of sight if you can see the target, though in some situations the GM might decide the effect can't go through a glass window or similarly transparent object. This just denotes whether or not a target can be seen by the character. For alternatives to this rule, for characters that are blind, see Adjusting Abilities in Chapter 1. Darkness can also make certain actions more challenging. The GM should reflect this in the difficulty of an action roll. Gold tracks how much wealth a character has with them on their journey and can often be spent on things like items, consumables, and equipment. Some campaigns will be more or less focused on gold as a reward, so players should talk with their GM about how much gold will come into play. There are no set prices in this book for weapons, armor, and loot, specifically to serve the purpose of not locking players out of adding exciting equipment to their characters simply because they aren't playing a gold-focused campaign. The GM will determine the prices based on the amount of gold being given out during your sessions. Gold is measured in coins, handfuls, bags, and chests. Whenever you have marked off enough slots in a given category that you should reach the next category, instead mark one in that following category and erase all the slots in the current one. For example, if you have 9 coins and gain another, you instead mark a handful and erase all coins. If you have 9 handfuls and gain another, you mark a bag and erase all handfuls. If you should ever have more than one chest, you'll need to store some of your gold elsewhere before you can take more. I think this is a good way to show both that, yes, this is the system is looking to be streamlined in some things, but also conveying that kind of video gamey, like, how many coins do you have in a Mario game, kind of Saturday morning cartoon kind of a thing, right? I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but I think this is another reinforced example of everything's just sort of, it's there, it's kind of passive, you don't need to worry about it. You know, does the presence of copper, silver, and gold in D&D, you know, somehow inflict something terrible on people? Well, no more than, you know, it could be annoying to keep track of inventory. I mean, I'm someone who doesn't like playing inventory mini games. You know, like the exact specificity. Like, I don't know if Coffee Cat's here. Coffee Cat in the Chroma Company campaign was playing a party accountant for a while, if I recall correctly. So from the conceptual or design perspective, it's a weird thing where it's both freeing, but it's also aggravating to have a lot of non-committal, you can do this, but you also don't have to. Here's the rules, but you don't need to follow the rules. This is not a slam against the system. This is maybe the pacing, or that very passive tone that I was talking about earlier, where things are put forward and then retracted, which can lead to, I guess, maybe a muddled feeling or a non-committal feeling, or it doesn't really matter. And then if we're questioning if it doesn't matter, then why is it in here? Other than, yeah, we can consider it. I can consider running an Alien RPG game in D&D as well, instead of using Alien RPG for Alien RPG. I can do that. I can use a host of optional rules, but that's left to a to a sidebar or even in a separate book apart from the player's guide, right? And the DMG. Now, this system might put everything into one book, and this has to be the sidebars have to be there as well for consideration. But in terms of the tonal presentation, yeah, it's broad and it's not specific, and that also can feel diminished, maybe, in a way. Does that make sense? Am I making sense with how I'm describing this feeling that I have? So I'm not railing on this, but it does kind of reinforce the tone of a video game or a Saturday morning cartoon, which, if that's what we're going for with Daggerheart, then absolutely this is hitting it, and that's fine. Because for as great as the Essence 20 system may very well be, maybe a lot of people don't want to play Power Rangers or My Little Pony in it. However, they might want to play G.I. Joe or Transformers. It's the same system, maybe written and delivered in a different way or has a different tone. So, just observations, right? We're here to review, we're here to discuss, so why not do that in a very open and friendly manner? But yeah, if you all have, if there are things that you're thinking or feeling as well, I'd be interested in hearing what it is, what is your gut reaction? What is it that you have to think or to say about what we have gone over so far? But let's continue on here. As soon as I get back to the PDF. Here we go. Oh wait, that's the Quick Start adventure. Okay. A party may choose to rest before they continue forward on their journey, and when they do, each PC has the chance to make a few downtime moves. Though downtime is their time to recover from the dangers they've faced, it's also an ideal opportunity for characters to have important emotional scenes with each other, to learn more about one another, and have a character-centric conversation that may not be as easy to find time for in big battles or high-intensity moments. This is a chance for players to lean on their connections to the party and explore the story that happens between them in their quiet moments together. When the party decides they want to begin downtime, they will need to make a choice between a short rest and a long rest. They can take up to 3 short rests before their long rest has to be a long rest, or their next rest has to be a long rest. If a short rest is interrupted, such as by an enemy attack, characters don't gain its benefits. If a long rest is interrupted, characters instead gain the benefits of a short rest, even if they've already had 3. A short rest is when player characters are only able to stop and catch their breath, taking a break for about an hour. Each player can swap any domain cards in their loadout for any other in their vault and choose 2 moves below. Tend to wounds, clear stress, repair armor, prepare. A long rest is when player characters are able to make camp, relax for a few hours, and get some sleep. Each player can swap any domain cards in their loadout for any in their vault and choose 2 moves below. Tend to all wounds, clear all stress, repair all armor, prepare, and work on a project. Hi, Survival. If a PC wants to pursue a project that would take a substantial amount of time, but progress can be made during a long rest, they should first discuss it with the GM. This could involve deciphering an ancient text, crafting a new weapon, or something else. Projects usually involve a progress countdown. Each time a PC takes the work on a project downtime move during a long rest, they might automatically tick down the countdown, or the GM might ask them to make an action roll to gauge their progress. When you take a short or long rest, this can refresh your ability to use some of your features, and it can end some temporary effects. At the end of a short rest, you end any effects that last until a short rest, and you regain the use of any features that can be used a number of times per short rest. At the end of a long rest, you end any effects that last until a long rest, and you regain the use of any features that can be used a number of times per long rest. Additionally, a long rest counts as a short rest for these effects. So if a move lets you use it once per short rest, you can refresh it after a long rest. Downtime allows for quiet scenes between PCs, encouraging personal moments in the story, but the world doesn't stop when you rest. Be cautious of how many rests your party decides to take, since downtime is also an invitation for the GM to progress events in the background, and these might have consequences down the line. Facing death. Alright, so let's see what happens here. Facing death is an important part of being an adventurer, and having a character die can be an exciting end to a story and an opportunity for the player to transition into something new. In Daggerheart, when you mark your last hit point, you make a death move. Choose one of the options below. Blaze of Glory. You embrace death and go out in a blaze of glory. Take one action at GM discretion, which becomes an automatic critical success. Then cross through the veil of death. Avoid death. You avoid death and face the consequences. Roll your fear die. If its value is equal to or under your level, you gain a scar. You also drop unconscious temporarily. Work with the GM to describe how the situation gets much worse because of it. You may not move or act while unconscious. You return to consciousness when an ally clears one or more of your marked hit points, or when your party finishes the next long rest. Risk it all. Roll your duality dice. If hope is higher, you stay on your feet and clear an amount of hit points and or stress equal to the value of the hope die. Divide the hope die value up between these however you'd prefer. If your fear die is higher, you cross through the veil of death. If the duality dice are tied, you stay on your feet and clear all hit points and stress. If a player makes a death move that results in their character dying or no longer being able to play, they should work with the GM before the next session to build a new character at the current level of the rest of the party. Scars. If you choose to avoid death, you might take a scar. If you do so, permanently cross out one of your hope slots. You cannot use this slot to store hope anymore. The narrative impact of this scar is up to you. For example, you might now bear a physical scar, a painful memory, or a deep fear. When you put a scar on your last hope slot, it is time to end your character's journey. Work with the GM to find a graceful and fitting way for the party to say goodbye to them at the end of the session, and prepare a new character for the next time you play. Resurrection. It is possible to resurrect a dead character, though it will likely be a long, difficult, and costly process, and they likely won't return the same as they died. If a party decides to take this path upon a character's death, the GM will tell the players what it will take to make that happen. For more details on this, see the section for resurrection in the GM section on page here. Section pending. There is also a one-time resurrection spell available at level 10 for any class that includes the Splendor domain. Once this spell is used, it will go into your vault permanently. When a combat scenario is likely to last more than a couple rolls, when play moves to maps and miniatures, or when seconds count in the narrative. You know what? We've discussed things for about another hour, and I think we have at least one more section to go here. Let's pause Chapter 2 here on the action tracker, and we will pick up here. But let's refresh ourselves one more time. Let's get up and stretch. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll get back to going over things for the action tracker, like when the minutia, presumably, of the game begins to occur. we'll see. And again, your comments and thoughts are very welcome. Here as well. I don't want this to just be a lecture and presentation on my behalf. I'm happy to share my thoughts and feelings and my senses that activate as we're going over the material. But I also am very curious what you think about what we've covered so far. Is something awesome? Is this something you can adopt into your Alien RPG game, or your One Ring game, or your Pathfinder game? Or you say, no, I am getting this system. I'm going to play it as it is, and this hits everything that I want to express in a game, because this could very well scratch that itch. And if you are that person, I would love to hear about it. I would love to know. And if it's not, if something or everything isn't working for you, if it's not doing it for you mechanically or tonally, let me know too. Let's talk about it. This isn't sensationalism. I'm not dropping hot takes. I'm not owning anyone online with this. Let's talk about it like reasonable adults. We can do that on the internet still, right? Hopefully. Anyway, I'll see you all soon. Let's get up and stretch for a bit, huh?